I came home that Monday thinking about nothing more than dinner and a cold shower, and by the time I parked my truck, I was already standing in the middle of a property dispute that would end up costing an entire neighborhood their front door. At first, I couldn't even explain what felt off. It was just this quiet, nagging feeling, like when you walk into your own house and something's been moved half an inch to the left. You don't see it right away, but your brain does. I turned into my driveway like I had done 1,000 times before, gravel crunching under the tires, radio still playing low, and I remember slowing down without meaning to, because something about the angle of the fence line didn't look right. I sat there for a second, engine running, just staring. Then I noticed the mailbox. It was closer, not a little closer, enough that I could tell from the driver's seat. And that's when my stomach did that slow drop. I killed the engine, stepped out, and the first thing I heard was the wind. No birds, no neighbors, just that hollow quiet you get when something's wrong but hasn't announced itself yet. I walked toward the fence, boots dragging through the gravel, and with every step it got worse. The strip of gravel along the edge of the driveway was narrower. The posts, they were new. Clean wood, sharp edges, concrete still pale like it hadn't even seen a full day of sun yet. I reached out and touched one of them just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. And yeah, it was real. Solid. Recently set. That's when I looked down the line and saw my old fence, stacked neatly on my side like somebody had done me the courtesy of organizing the mess they made. Like it was something I'd deal with later. Like it belonged to me, but the decision didn't. No note. No call. No knock. Just replaced. And zip-tied to one of those brand new posts was a cheap plastic sign, the kind you'd expect on a construction site, and I remember actually laughing under my breath when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous it almost felt like a joke. Property line adjusted per development plan. I said it out loud just to hear how stupid it sounded. Development plan. The only development around me was half a mile down the road. A brand new subdivision they'd been building for the last year or so. All polished stone signs and fake lakes and names that sounded like they came out of a real estate brochure written by someone who had never seen dirt in their life. Willow Creek Reserve. That's what they called it. Problem was, there hadn't been a creek there in decades. My place, on the other hand, 3 acres, corner lot, been in my family longer than that subdivision had even been an idea. My dad cleared that land himself back in the early 90s, worked weekends for months just to get the brush out, built the first fence with his own hands. I grew up running along that exact line, knew every post, every dip in the ground like it was part of me. So when I saw that line shifted 6 feet in, clean across the length of my property, yeah, that wasn't just a mistake. That was someone making a decision they had no right to make. I walked the entire stretch twice, just to be sure, counting steps, matching landmarks, checking where the old fence used to sit. And every time, it came out the same. 6 feet. Doesn't sound like much when you say it fast, but stretched across a few hundred feet, that's real land. That's space. That's taxes. That's history. I stood there for a while longer than I probably needed to, just staring at it, trying to figure out how someone convinces themselves this is okay. How they skip the part where you knock on a door and have a conversation like a normal human being. And then it hit me. The subdivision. They were the only ones with a reason. Their entrance sat right along that edge, big stone sign, lights, landscaping, the whole show. Looked nice, I'll give them that, but it always sat just a little too close to my side for comfort. I never pushed it, though. Years back, when the original developer was still around, he came by one afternoon, introduced himself like a decent guy, explained they needed a bit of space for the entrance feature, said it would be temporary, respectful, nothing permanent, and my dad was the kind of man who believed a handshake meant something. So he said yes. No paperwork, no easement, just trust. And for a while, it worked. Nobody crossed lines, nobody got greedy. But people change, or maybe it's just that new people don't feel bound by old promises. I got back in the truck, sat there with my hands on the wheel, and just stared straight ahead for a minute, because I already knew where this was going. This wasn't an accident. This was someone deciding that 6 feet of my land would make their entrance look better, cleaner, more symmetrical for whoever was driving by. And they figured I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't care, or maybe wouldn't fight it. I let out a breath, started the engine again, and backed out of the driveway without even going inside. If someone thought they could just redraw my property line like that, I was about to go have a conversation. I drove straight into Willow Creek Reserve without even thinking about it, tires rolling from rough county gravel onto that smooth, freshly laid asphalt like I was crossing some invisible line between two completely different worlds. And in a way, I guess I was. On my side, things were simple, worn in, real. On theirs, everything looked curated, like it had been designed more for appearances than for living. The entrance I had let slide all those years sat right ahead of me, or at least what was left of it after I'd seen my fence. Big stone columns, soft lighting tucked underneath, a fake waterfall trickling down polished rock like it was trying a little too hard to convince you this place had character. I parked right up front, killed the engine, and just sat there for a second watching the water run, thinking about my dad shaking that developer's hand, trusting him, never imagining that one day someone else would come along and decide that handshake didn't matter anymore. Then I got out and headed toward the HOA office. It was one of those temporary buildings they dress up to look permanent, nice siding, fake shutters, a flag out front, everything clean enough to suggest authority without actually earning it. I knocked once, opened the door, and stepped inside before anyone could answer. The air smelled like fresh paint and coffee that had been sitting too long. Behind a desk sat a man I'd never met before, but instantly knew exactly who he was. Late 40s maybe, pressed shirt, that kind of smile that looks friendly until you realize it doesn't reach the eyes. "You must be Daniel," he said, like we were already on a first-name basis, like we'd had this conversation before. I didn't sit. I didn't shake his hand. I just looked at him and said, "You moved my fence." He leaned back in his chair, slow, casual, like he had all the time in the world. "We adjusted the boundary based on a new survey," he replied, voice smooth, practiced, the kind of tone people use when they've already decided they're right. "We assumed it wouldn't be an issue." I actually laughed at that, just once, short and dry. "You assumed I wouldn't mind losing 6 feet of my property?" He spread his hands slightly, like he was explaining something obvious. "It improves the visual flow of the entrance, makes the community feel more cohesive." I stared at him for a second, letting that settle in, because I wanted to make sure I heard it right. Visual flow. That's what my land was worth to him. Not history, not ownership, not legality, just how things looked when someone drove by at 25 miles an hour. "You ever hear of asking?" I said. His smile tightened just a little. "We followed proper procedure." "You didn't follow mine," I replied. That's when the air shifted. Just a little, but enough. He sat forward, folded his hands on the desk, and dropped the friendly act. "Look," he said, "these developments require adjustments. The previous understanding wasn't formalized, and the updated survey gives us a clearer boundary." There it was. Not formalized. That handshake my dad trusted to him. It was just an inconvenience. Something to override. I nodded slowly, like I was considering it, even though I already knew exactly what I was going to do next. "All right," I said, calm, almost too calm. "Then I'll follow proper procedure too." He watched me for a second, trying to read what that meant, but I didn't give him anything else. I turned around, walked out, and didn't look back. The drive to the county records office took about 20 minutes, and I spent most of it in silence. No radio, just the sound of the road and my own thoughts lining things up piece by piece. I wasn't angry the way people expect. No yelling, no shaking hands, no need to slam anything. It was quieter than that. Colder. The kind of anger that doesn't rush, it calculates. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I wasn't wondering what to do anymore. I was just checking off steps. Inside, the building felt like every government office you've ever been in: fluorescent lights, beige walls, that low hum of printers and paperwork moving slowly through systems older than the people using them. I went up to the counter, gave them my address, and asked for every document tied to that parcel: original plat maps, boundary records, anything that went back to when the land was first divided. The woman behind the counter didn't ask questions, just nodded and disappeared into the back. While I waited, I leaned against the counter and thought about how easy it had been for them to act. Just show up, move a fence, leave a sign. Confidence like that only comes from believing nobody's going to push back. Or worse, from experience. Like they'd done something like this before and gotten away with it. When she came back, she handed me a stack of papers thicker than I expected. I took them to a table by the window and started going through everything, page by page, tracing lines, checking measurements, looking for anything that had changed. And it didn't take long. The original boundary was exactly where I knew it was. Same markers, same measurements. Nothing had shifted. What they had was a new survey, sure, but surveys don't override ownership. Paper doesn't rewrite history unless both sides agree to it. And I hadn't agreed to a damn thing. Then I found what I was really looking for. No easement. No recorded permission for that entrance. No legal claim to the land it sat on. Just empty space where something official should have been. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and for the first time since pulling into my driveway earlier that day, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because now it made sense. They didn't just take 6 feet because they wanted to. They took it because they needed it, to justify something they already had no right to. And that changed everything. I gathered the documents, took them back to the counter, and filed a notice revoking any informal or temporary permission for structures on my property, effective immediately. The woman looked at me over the top of her glasses and asked, "You sure you want to do that?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I'm sure." Walking out of that building felt different than walking in. Lighter, in a way, but also sharper. Like everything had snapped into focus. I didn't go back to the HOA office. I didn't call anyone. I went home, parked the truck, and for the first time all day, I stepped inside my house. It was quiet, familiar, the kind of quiet that reminds you what you're protecting. I made myself a cup of coffee, even though it was already late, sat down at the kitchen table, and spread the papers out in front of me one more time. Every line, every number, every inch of that land, it was mine. Legally, clearly, undeniably mine. And they had crossed it. Not by accident. Not by misunderstanding. By choice. I took a sip of coffee, set the cup down, and stared out the window toward where my fence used to stand, now 6 feet closer, like it had been pushed back to make room for someone else's idea of what things should look like. I shook my head slightly, more disappointed than anything else. Because this could have been a conversation. A simple one. But they didn't want that. They wanted control. And the thing about control is that it only works until someone decides not to give it to you anymore. The next morning, I was up before the sun, already dressed, already moving. I made a couple calls, lined up a crew, gave them an address, and told them exactly what needed to happen. No more, no less. They didn't ask questions either. People who do that kind of work usually don't. By the time the sun started climbing over the trees, I was already back in my truck, heading toward that same entrance, except this time, I wasn't there to talk. By the time I pulled up to the entrance again, the crew was already there. 2 trucks, a trailer, and that quiet kind of efficiency you only get from people who know exactly what they're doing and don't need to make a show of it. Engines idling, tools laid out, nobody wasting motion. I stepped out, gave a simple nod, and one of the guys walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "You the owner?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and handed him the paperwork. He looked it over for maybe 10 seconds, then nodded once. "All right," he said, no hesitation, no drama, just turned and signaled the others. And that was it. No countdown, no announcement, just action. The first thing to go was the sign, that big polished stone slab with Willow Creek Reserve carved into it like it had always belonged there. They hooked it up, braced it, and started easing it out of the ground, concrete base cracking loose with a dull, heavy sound that echoed more than I expected. I stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching it lift inch by inch, and I won't lie, there was a moment where it felt surreal. Like I was watching something permanent realize it wasn't. The columns came next, then the lighting fixtures, then the stonework along the edges, piece by piece. Everything that gave that entrance its identity started disappearing. The waterfall shut off early on, leaving behind nothing but damp rock and silence. No rushing water, no soft glow, just exposed ground and the sound of metal and gravel shifting underway. It took a few hours, but it never felt rushed. They were careful, precise, not tearing things apart, just removing them like they were never supposed to be there in the first place. By mid-morning, it was gone, completely gone. What used to be a grand, polished entryway was now just an open stretch of road leading straight into the subdivision. No sign, no boundary, nothing to tell you were entering anything at all, just pavement and space. And that's when the first car came through. A delivery van, slowing slightly like the driver expected a gate or a marker, then just continuing on. Then another, and another. It didn't take long. Word spreads fast, but confusion spreads faster. Without that entrance, Without that visual cue that says this place is private, controlled, people treated it like any other road. Cut-through traffic started almost immediately. By the afternoon, it wasn't just a trickle anymore. It was steady. Trucks, lost drivers, kids in beat-up sedans taking shortcuts they didn't even know existed the day before. I stayed there longer than I planned to, leaning against my truck, just watching it happen. Not interfering, not directing, just letting reality settle in where appearance used to be. Around noon, I saw him. The HOA president. He came in fast, too fast for someone who was just checking on things, tires rolling hard over the same road he'd probably driven 100 times thinking it belonged to him. He got out before the car even fully stopped, doors slamming behind him, and marched straight toward me. Face already red, voice already raised. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, gesturing wildly at the empty space like it offended him personally. I didn't move, didn't change my posture, just looked at him and said, "That was on my land." He shook his head, pacing a few steps like he was trying to reset the situation through movement alone. "You can't just remove a community entrance," he said, like the word community carried weight on its own. I reached into the truck, grabbed the folder, and handed it to him. "I didn't remove yours," I said evenly. "I removed mine." He flipped through the papers quickly, eyes scanning, jaw tightening with every page. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "This affects property values, security. You're going to cause problems for a lot of people." I shrugged slightly. "You already did. That landed. You could see it." Not because he agreed, but because he understood. There's a difference. For a second, neither of us said anything. Cars kept passing behind him, one after another, like a quiet reminder that whatever control he thought he had was already gone. "We can fix this," he said finally, tone shifting, softer now, more calculated. "We'll move the fence back. We'll make it right." I shook my head. "No," he blinked, caught off guard by how quick that came. "We'll compensate you," he added, stepping closer, lowering his voice like this was turning into a negotiation he could win. "Fair value. More than fair." I looked past him at the road, at another car turning in without hesitation, then back at him. "No," I said again, just as calm as before. That's when frustration started to crack through the surface. "Then what do you want?" he asked, sharper now. And that was the moment. The one where everything they assumed about me, what I'd accept, what I'd tolerate, what I'd settle for, finally ran out of road. I took a breath, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the words to land clean. "I want it in writing," I said. "Permanent easement. Monthly compensation. Full acknowledgement of the original boundary line. Exactly where it was before you touched it. And you cover every cost, the fence, the taxes, all of it." He stared at me, measuring it, weighing what it would cost against what it was already costing them. Behind him, another truck rolled through, slower this time, like even the drivers could feel something had changed here. "That's excessive," he said, but there wasn't much conviction left in it. I tilted my head slightly. "So was moving my fence." That was the end of the argument. Not because he agreed, but because there wasn't anything left to argue with. By the end of the week, everything was signed. Not a handshake this time. Ink. Copies. Records. The fence went back exactly where it belonged. Every post measured twice, set deep, solid. They paid for new materials, covered the difference in taxes, and made sure every document reflected the truth they tried to adjust. The entrance came back too, but different. Smaller. Simpler. No oversized stone statement. No dramatic waterfall trying to sell an idea. Just a modest marker, clean, legal, and very clearly not theirs in the way it used to be. Now, every time someone drives through it, they're crossing land they don't own, entering a space that exists because I allow it to. And that changes things, whether they think about it or not. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the evening, watch the cars come and go, and think about how close it all came to being just another story where someone takes a little more than they should and gets away with it. 6 feet doesn't sound like much. It really doesn't. Until it's yours. So here's the question I've been thinking about ever since, and I'm curious what you'd do. If someone crossed your line like that, quietly, confidently, assuming you wouldn't push back, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have let it slide for the sake of keeping the peace? Because out here, peace and respect, they're not always the same thing. Let me know what you think.